The first sign. In the quiet town of Black Hollow, nestled deep within the woods, the Whitmore family had lived in their ancestral home for generations. Sarah Whitmore, a 17-year-old girl, had always been the quiet, thoughtful type. She loved books, took care of stray animals, and spent her time sketching in her journal. But in the summer of 1987, something changed. It began with small things: whispers in the dark, the feeling of being watched, strange noises scratching inside the walls. Sarah dismissed it at first, blaming her imagination. But then came the dreams, horrific, twisted nightmares of shadowy figures standing at the foot of her bed, whispering in voices that made her ears bleed. One night, she woke up with deep scratch marks on her arms. Another night, she found clumps of her hair on the pillow, as if something had been tearing it out in her sleep. Her parents, Mark and Evelyn Whitmore, grew concerned when Sarah's behavior changed. She stopped eating, barely spoke, and spent hours staring at the corner of her room, mumbling in a voice that wasn't her own. But the worst was yet to come. Something else is inside her. One evening, Sarah's younger brother, Daniel, was woken up by the sound of guttural growling coming from her room. When he peeked inside, he saw Sarah crouched on the ceiling, her body twisted, her head turned at an unnatural angle. She stared at him with black, empty eyes and whispered, "He's coming." Daniel screamed, waking the entire house. When their parents burst in, Sarah was lying in bed as if nothing had happened, but the air smelled of rotting meat, and deep claw marks ran down the wooden floor. Mark and Evelyn rushed Sarah to doctors, but every test came back normal. Psychiatric evaluations labeled her as having schizophrenia, but Sarah only laughed at the diagnosis, saying in a low, distorted voice, "They don't know what I am." The possession takes over. The real horror began one Sunday night. Evelyn woke up to the sound of wet chewing. When she walked down the hall to Sarah's room, she found her daughter sitting in a pool of blood, gnawing on her own arm. Evelyn screamed. Sarah turned to her mother with a smile too wide for her face. "He's here now, Mama." Sarah's body contorted violently, her bones cracking, her skin stretching as if something was moving underneath it. She crawled toward Evelyn in an unnatural way, her joints bending backward. That night, Father James Holloway, a priest who had once witnessed a real exorcism, was called in. As soon as he entered the Whitmore house, he felt it. The suffocating, heavy presence of something ancient and evil. The exorcism begins. Father Holloway knew this was not just mental illness, Sarah was possessed. With the help of 2 other priests, he began the ritual of exorcism. The moment they started, Sarah's body lifted off the bed, her back arching as she let out an unearthly scream. The priests prayed louder, but Sarah mocked them, laughing, screaming in voices that didn't belong to her. "You are weak. She belongs to us." The lights flickered, the walls shook. A shadowy figure appeared behind Sarah, its long, spindly fingers digging into her shoulders. The priests continued, "In the name of Christ, leave this child." Sarah's body convulsed violently. The priests watched in horror as her eyes rolled back, her mouth stretched wider and wider until her jaw unhinged like a snake's. Then, the thing inside her began to name them. "James Holloway, your mother never forgave you before she died. Father Benedict, you broke your vow, didn't you? Father Thomas, you are already marked for hell." The priests began to doubt, and that's when the demon gained power. The final battle. Sarah screamed in agony, her body rising 3 feet into the air before crashing down with a sickening crack. Blood dripped from her nose, her mouth. The priests knew they were losing. Father Holloway, in desperation, grabbed Sarah and pressed a crucifix against her forehead. "In the name of Christ, get out." Sarah let out one final, inhuman shriek, a sound that shattered windows and caused every light in the house to explode. And then, silence. Sarah collapsed. The demon was gone. But as the priests helped her up, she whispered something in Holloway's ear that made his blood run cold. "It's not over." Sarah survived, but she was never the same. She didn't remember the possession, but sometimes at night, she still heard the whispers. Father Holloway, haunted by what he had seen, left the priesthood. Years later, he was found dead in his home, his body twisted into an impossible shape. The last thing he had written on his wall in blood was, "He's coming back." Some say Sarah Whitmore lived a normal life after the exorcism. Others claim she disappeared one night, leaving behind only claw marks on the walls. All we know for sure is this: some demons never really leave, and sometimes they come back for more. Would you survive exorcism? If you hear scratching inside your walls at night, if you saw something standing at the foot of your bed, if your loved one started speaking in a voice that wasn't theirs, would you run or would you stay and face the horror? Because once you invite them in, they never really leave.